Larry, good morning. How are you?
So this isn't my day to fill in for Danielle to get my shot on being a regular.
No, I think you.
So that was what I was told. That's the only reason I took this call.
I don't believe.
Hey, come on, guys.
I don't believe that the hourly rate is the same when it comes to lawyers and news people.
Oh, but I guarantee you the misery scale isn't even close.
So listen, a couple cruise lines have now said you're going to have to be vaccinated to get on the boat. There's been an ongoing discussion this morning, which I know you were listening to, about whether or not other businesses will do that. And the Mets are requiring that you either are vaccinated or have a negative test. Mm-hmm. Is that something that could be challenged legally in the future, or are they allowed to do that?
So it's a little bit of both. I think it can and it will be challenged in the future. We look at the Constitution. The 14th Amendment specifically, Greg, prevents states from infringing on the privileges or immunities of citizens without due process of the law. So, then we look at the rest of the Constitution, and specifically the 10th Amendment, which gives the states all the police powers and all the rights that Congress and the Senate doesn't have. So if you look at the Constitution as a whole, governments have the right to protect the people, and they call it police powers. And certainly when there's a pandemic, they have the right to quarantine people and take steps such as those to protect the public health. Now, the question becomes, moving forward, does that ability extend to travel bans or venue bans? How long does that go on for? Is this something that has no time frame? Is it limited in scope? These are the questions that you have to ask. I mean, right now, you're correct. I know that Royal Caribbean is one cruise line that said, hey, no vaccine, no entry.
Right.
And that's a private company, so it's a little bit different. But the interesting thing is, even with private companies, a lot of these private companies have public licenses. For example, a bar that has a liquor license, that's a public license for the public to go in and enjoy. That's owned by the bar. So I think that this is going to be something that, as time moves forward and we look at how these quarantines extend to private businesses and the world in general, there is going to be challenges, certainly going to be challenges. And I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis and on a business-by-business basis as to whether or not those are upheld.
Yeah,
How's that for a lawyer answer?
Well, I think it's an interesting thing to think about because, and it's moving pretty rapidly. Like you think about, we just started vaccinating people a couple months ago, mm-hmm. and now you have businesses that are stepping up and saying you have to have been vaccinated in order to utilize our business or our service. So I would assume that it's not just going to be the cruise lines. I mean, my question is whether the airlines do it next, or whether it ends up being places like Home Depot or places where there are or movie theaters or places where there are hundreds of people gathering.
It is an interesting question, and this is one of those things that your caller there, the guy, it was probably a doctor. He sounded like a doctor.
The nurse,
yeah. The one that had access to all the studies, and the one that believes that if you're anti-vax, then you haven't researched it. That's the problem. That attitude. There's a lot of people that are anti-vaxxers that have been anti-vaxxers long before this because they do research it. I've attempted to try to find out what's best for my family, and you go on the CDC website, and we were on Larry the Lawyer, if you remember, Greg, and somebody called in and said, hey, I'm pregnant. They're telling me I have to get vaccinated. Well, if you remember on that show, the CDC clearly stated on their website, if you're expecting to be pregnant or you're pregnant, don't take the vaccine. I read it right from the website on that show.
Yes.
A week later, that was gone. Things are changing so rapidly, and they're not giving reasons. That's the difficult part. You talk about going out there and getting the knowledge to make an informed decision, but everything's changing in the blink of an eye, number one. And number two, where do you get good information anymore? Where do you find the truth? That's an interesting conversation because that's something that's very difficult and elusive these days, the truth.
What do you think is going to happen with colleges and universities? I would assume that they're going to maybe require students to have been vaccinated come September, don't you think?
Yeah, now we're getting into a much different area. Some of the kids that go to college aren't even 18, so they're not adults yet. Most of the kids that are in college have their life in front of them. We don't know yet what the long-term effects of any of these vaccines are going to be. Talking about research, this RNA vaccines, before these things came out, last year when I tried to find something out about what these things are, it was experimental. It was something that had never been approved, according to Wikipedia and the CDC and some of these other sites that I looked at. Now you don't see any of that information out there anymore. Again, things change so quickly, and I think part of it is probably public relations, and part of it is probably statistics and testing and time. But again, it's very difficult to find accurate, good information.
And it would
be
be
a layperson.
And has it been challenged, or has it come up yet? I don't know if you know or not, but would they be able to require a vaccine as a condition of employment somewhere?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's going to be one of the questions, Greg, that we're going to have to look at the type of business it is. Is it a business that has a public right? Or is it a private business? I think there's going to be a lot of factors that go into that. But one thing is for sure, times are changing, as Dylan said, right?
Yes. All right, Larry the lawyer.
And Larry, don't you think, though, just last question for me, is don't you think that there'll be somebody who ultimately wins a ton of money because of
bag of cash?
Yeah, because of something they weren't able to do, and then you'll start to see these companies go, you know what, we're not going to mandate vaccines because they know a good enough lawyer will be able to get somebody something for some type of discrimination for the vaccine.
I think the bigger problem, Wiggy, is going to be litigation takes a long time, especially this kind of litigation. You're talking years. I think what you're seeing, if you look at Texas, for example, they eliminated their mask mandate, and a couple restaurants and stores say, hey, you still have to wear the mask. Well, the public has the right to not go to those stores, and that's what happened to a couple places in Texas that are now out of business because of that. And I don't know that that's fair either, but at the end of the day, I don't know that it's going to be lawsuits as much as the public. The one thing that we have in the United States of America is we have, people have the right to protest. And when they do, usually something happens from that. And I think this is going to be one of those cases that if people are upset enough, people are going to say, hey, you know what, enough is enough. And that's what's going to make the change. I don't think it's going to necessarily be a lawyer because that's going to be 2 to 3, 4 years away.
Yeah.